The first clue was a row of orange survey flags running through a hillside nobody was supposed to build on. They appeared behind the homes on Crestview Canyon Drive one Saturday morning, pressed into the dry grass beneath a stand of Coast live oaks. There were 32 of them, stretching from the storm drain channel at the bottom of the slope to the old firebreak trail near the ridge. By noon, 3 homeowners had called the HOA office. By Monday, they were told the flags marked routine drainage assessment work. And by Wednesday, a resident named Daniel Kim called me because a contractor had left a rolled-up site plan on the sidewalk. The plan was labeled Proposed Private Garage Court Ridgeview Reserve. Not drainage work, not tree maintenance, not a fire safety inspection. Garage. 16 of them, with private storage bays, paved access, retaining walls, and a gated service lane carved into the greenbelt behind the neighborhood. When I arrived in Thousand Oaks, Daniel was waiting for me beside the trailhead with a coffee in one hand and the rolled-up plan in the other. He was 39, worked as a civil engineer, and had moved into Ridgeview Reserve with his wife and young daughter 5 years earlier. He was not the type of person who called someone because a board painted a bench the wrong color. He had tried to assume there was a reasonable explanation. Then he read the plan. "Look at this," he said, spreading the paper across the hood of his car. The drawing showed the greenbelt as a blank tan strip between the rear lots and the hillside. A new paved lane entered from the lower service road, curved behind 12 homes, and ended at a line of detached garage buildings. The plans called them private accessory structures. But there was nothing accessory about them. Each garage measured nearly 900 square feet. Several included workshop areas. 2 had small second-floor storage lofts. The largest structures backed directly against the open hillside, where the grass turned golden in summer, and where the Santa Ana winds could move through the canyon like a blowtorch. "What did the HOA say?" I asked. Daniel handed me a letter. The letter had gone out only to homeowners who backed onto the greenbelt. It was signed by the Ridgeview Reserve HOA board president, Marlene Vos. It said the board was evaluating a limited sale of underutilized common area acreage to support capital improvements, stabilize reserves, and reduce future assessments. The phrase underutilized common area acreage was doing a lot of work. The greenbelt was not underutilized. It was where stormwater drained during heavy rain. It was where the local fire department accessed the upper slope during brush clearance inspections. It was where children walked on weekends, where residents saw coyotes at dawn, and where no one built because everyone assumed it was protected land. Daniel pointed toward the ridge. "Last fall, there was a small brush fire near the trail," he said. "Nothing major. Fire crews came through that service lane in minutes." "They use that lane regularly? For inspections?" "Yes. And for vegetation work." "Do you have any written records?" "I have photos. My neighbor has video from the fire last year." "Good. Keep them." He looked at the plan again. "Can they really sell this?" "That depends on what the HOA owns, what the CC&Rs allow, and what restrictions were recorded when the land was created." Marlene says the greenbelt belongs to the association. "It may. Then she can sell it?" Ownership is not always the final answer. That was one of the hardest things for people to understand about land. A deed tells you who owns something, but other documents can tell you what that owner is allowed to do with it. A parcel can be owned by an HOA and still be subject to a conservation restriction, a drainage easement, a fire access right, a view corridor, a habitat agreement, or a condition that limits how the land can be used forever. The restriction might be buried in a document recorded decades earlier. It might never appear in a casual board discussion. It might sit quietly in the county records until someone decides to pretend it does not exist. And if Marlene Vos had chosen the phrase underutilized common area acreage, I suspected she hoped nobody would look too closely. We walked down the trail. The greenbelt was a little over 7 acres, narrow and uneven, running behind the north side of Ridgeview Reserve. It was not a polished park. There were no playgrounds, benches, or manicured lawns. The slope was covered in native scrub, say, brittle grass, and old oak trees that leaned toward the canyon. At the bottom sat a concrete drainage basin half hidden by reeds. It was dry that day, but dry infrastructure can be deceptive. In Southern California, a channel can sit empty for months and still save a neighborhood when rain comes hard in January. Daniel pointed to a shallow swale near the lower homes. When it rains, water comes down from the ridge and collects here, he said. The basin takes it toward the county channel. Has it ever flooded? Not since we moved in, but the old owners told us it came close in 2005. I took photographs, the drainage swale, the firebreak lane, the oak trees, the orange flags, the warning signs posted at the trail entrance. One of them read, Ridgeview Reserve Greenbelt, no vehicles beyond this point, fire access only. The sign looked old. That was useful. Old signs often point toward old documents. Back at Daniel's house, we opened the HOA's governing documents. The CC&Rs were thick but unremarkable. They gave the association broad authority to maintain common areas, collect assessments, enforce architectural rules, and manage landscaping. They also allowed the HOA to sell or lease some association property with membership approval. Marlene was probably relying on that language, but halfway through the common area section, I found a sentence that narrowed the issue. The association's property rights were subject to all recorded easements, conditions, restrictions, and dedications affecting the development. That was not enough to stop the sale by itself, but it meant the real answer was elsewhere. I went to the county recorder's office the next morning. Ridgeview Reserve had been built in 1994, which meant there was a good chance the original development file had been recorded in paper volumes before everything moved online. I searched the tract map first. The subdivision map showed the 7-acre strip clearly. It was labeled Parcel G Open Space and Drainage Reserve. Not just common area, Open Space and Drainage Reserve. I requested the map jacket, the original grant deed, the environmental conditions, and the documents recorded by the developer when the tract was approved. The clerk brought out a file cart. I spent the next 4 hours reading. There were grading agreements, drainage reports, utility easements, fire department comments, oak tree protection conditions, a letter from the County Planning Commission, a maintenance agreement between the original developer and the future HOA. Then I found a deed recorded in 1993. It transferred Parcel G from the original landowner to Ridgeview Development Corporation. The deed included a paragraph in smaller type beneath the legal description. Grantor conveys Parcel G subject to a perpetual restriction that said, parcel shall be preserved and maintained as open space for stormwater detention, fuel modification access, emergency fire response, and passive residential use. No building, structure, paved private roadway, or exclusive commercial or residential facility shall be constructed thereon except facilities required for drainage, emergency access, or habitat management. I read it once, then again. No building, no structure, no paved private roadway, no exclusive commercial or residential facility. The garages were not merely inconvenient. They were prohibited, and because the restriction was perpetual, it did not expire when the developer left. It did not disappear when the HOA took ownership. It followed the land. I made certified copies. Then I looked for the next piece. A restriction matters most when the people responsible for a sale knew it existed. The original development file included a title report prepared for Ridgeview Development Corporation. The report listed the restriction in bold under exceptions affecting Parcel G. It also listed the county fire access easement and the drainage maintenance covenant by itself. That did not prove Marlene had seen it. But the current HOA would have needed a title report before selling the land. So I filed a written records request. I asked the board for all documents related to the proposed sale, including the purchase offer, appraisal, title report, environmental review, board minutes, legal advice, membership notices, and any correspondence with the proposed buyer. Daniel read my request before I sent it. Do you think they'll give it to us? They may not give us everything. And if they don't, then their silence becomes part of the story. Marlene replied 2 days later. Her email was short. She said the board was evaluating confidential negotiations and could not disclose contract documents before final action. She claimed the orange flags were part of preliminary planning. She said the Greenbelt remained association property and that no decision had been made. Then she added a final sentence. Residents should avoid spreading misinformation that may negatively affect the value of surrounding homes. Daniel read it on his phone and laughed without humor. They're selling the land behind our houses. But I'm the one affecting property values? They want you to feel irresponsible for asking questions. What do I do? Nothing reckless. That's it? For now, yes. He looked frustrated. I understood. When people see something wrong, they want to act immediately. They want to post online, confront the board, call the news, block a contractor, and make the problem visible enough that it cannot continue. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it gives the other side exactly what it needs, an excuse to call the concerned homeowner emotional, uninformed, or disruptive. Marlene had already started building that excuse, so we gave her nothing. Instead, I checked the county planning portal. The Greenbelt had a parcel number separate from the homes. That made it easier to search. I found no approved building permits, no application for garage structure, no environmental clearance, no fire access modification request. But I found something else. A pre-application meeting request filed by a company called Sierra Vista Storage Partners. The request was dated 3 weeks earlier. The description read, Concept review for 16 private vehicle storage, garages, and associated access improvements on approximately 1 acres of association-owned open space. The applicant listed a contact person, Marlene Vos. Not the board, not the HOA attorney. Marlene personally. I opened the uploaded concept packet. The first page showed a rendering of the garages. Modern wood and steel structures with rooftop solar panels, polished concrete aprons, and automatic gates. The marketing language described them as secure private garages for luxury vehicles, recreational equipment, and collector storage. The proposed price was not listed, but the packet said that membership acquisition opportunities would be available to qualified residents and outside buyers. Outside buyers? The Greenbelt was not being sold to solve a reserve fund problem. It was being turned into a private storage development, and the association's president had submitted the first planning request herself. That afternoon, Daniel received a notice in his mailbox. It announced a special HOA meeting for the following Tuesday. The agenda had only one item: discussion and possible authorization of a strategic disposition of excess association land. No mention of drainage. No mention of fire access. No mention of garages. No mention of the perpetual deed restriction. The meeting was 6 days away, and by then, I knew exactly what Marlene hoped would happen. She hoped residents would hear the word excess, see a promise of lower assessments, and vote before anyone discovered that the land they were being asked to sell was never theirs to build on in the first place. The special meeting was held in Ridgeview Reserve's clubhouse on a Tuesday night. The room had been designed for holiday parties, book clubs, and children's birthday gatherings. That evening, it held 90 angry homeowners, 6 board members, a property manager with a legal pad, and 1 developer representative who sat in the second row pretending not to be connected to the agenda. Marlene Vos stood at the front beside a projection screen. She wore a cream-colored suit and spoke with the measured confidence of someone who had rehearsed the same message until it sounded like common sense. Our association faces significant reserve obligations, she said. Roofing, drainage maintenance, slope stabilization, and rising insurance costs have placed pressure on the long-term budget. A slide appeared behind her. It showed a graph with projected assessment increases. Marlene clicked to the next slide. By strategically monetizing a portion of underutilized association land, Ridgeview Reserve can strengthen reserves, avoid special assessments, and preserve the quality of life residents expect. The phrase underutilized appeared again. Daniel sat beside me in the third row. His hands were folded tightly in his lap. "Say something," he whispered. "Not yet." Marlene's presentation was polished. She explained that the board had received a preliminary offer of $1.85 million for approximately 3 acres of excess common area. She said the buyer would assume development risk, pay for landscaping buffers, and contribute toward a future trail enhancement fund. She did not say the buyer planned 16 private garages. She did not say the proposed access road would cross the drainage swale. She did not say that outside buyers could purchase storage units. And she did not say that the land was subject to a perpetual restriction against buildings, paved private roads, and exclusive facilities. Instead, she showed another slide. No special assessment. Several homeowners nodded. That was the power of a number like $1. 85 millions. It made people stop thinking about grass, trees, and old signs on a trail. It made them imagine lower bills, repaired roofs, and an HOA that did not come asking for another emergency payment. Then Marlene opened the floor. The first person to speak was a retired dentist named Alan Meyer. "Will the sale require a vote of the membership?" he asked. "Yes," Marlene replied. "The board is seeking authorization to proceed with negotiations." "Will we see the purchase agreement?" "When a final agreement is ready for approval." "So we're voting before we see the terms?" "We are voting to authorize the board to negotiate the best possible terms." A murmur moved through the room. Then a woman near the door raised her hand. "What exactly is being built?" Marlene smiled. "The purchaser has discussed several concepts. Nothing has been finalized." "That wasn't my question." "The purchaser may pursue accessory structures consistent with county requirements." Daniel looked at me. I nodded. It was time. I stood and introduced myself. "My name is Anna Reyes. I'm assisting several Ridgeview Reserve homeowners in reviewing the recorded documents affecting Parcel G." Marlene's expression changed before I had even finished the sentence. Not panic. Recognition. She knew exactly what document I had found. The board's attorney, a man named Peter Cohn, leaned toward her and whispered something. Marlene gave him a sharp look. I held up the certified copy of the 1993 deed restriction. "Parcel G is not simply excess common area," I said. "It was conveyed subject to a perpetual restriction requiring it to remain open space for stormwater detention, fuel modification access, emergency fire response, and passive residential use." The room became still. I continued. "The restriction prohibits buildings, structure, paved private roadways, and exclusive residential or commercial facilities, except those necessary for drainage, emergency access, or habitat management." Marlene stepped forward. "That is an old development document," she said. "The association has received advice regarding its authority. Then you should be comfortable sharing that advice with the membership before asking them to approve a sale. Legal advice is privileged. The restriction is not." I placed the certified deed copy on the front table. Then I displayed the county subdivision map, which labeled the parcel Open Space and Drainage Reserve. Finally, I projected the concept packet from Sierra Vista Storage Partners. The rendering of the garage court filled the screen. 16 structures, a paved private lane, automatic gates, private vehicle storage. The word luxury appeared in the developer's own description. People in the room began talking at once. Marlene tried to regain control. "This is an early concept image. It has no legal significance. The concept request was filed with the county 3 weeks ago." I said, "It identifies you as the contact person." That was when the developer representative stood. His name was Philip Grant. He wore a charcoal jacket and carried a folder stamped with Sierra Vista Storage Partners. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," he said. "Our company is exploring options. We have not submitted a formal development application." "Did your company prepare this garage rendering?" I asked. "Yes." "Does it show 16 private garage structures?" "Yes." Does it show a paved access road? Yes. Does it describe outside buyer acquisition opportunities? He hesitated. Those are preliminary marketing ideas. Then the homeowners deserve to know what their HOA president has been negotiating on their behalf. Marlene's voice sharpened. This meeting is not a trial. No, I said. It is a request for authority from the people whose land you are trying to sell. The board president turned to Peter Cohn. Can you clarify the legal position? Peter stood slowly. He had the careful tone of someone who understood the danger of saying too much. The association recognizes that historic restrictions exist in the title records. The board believes there may be legal mechanisms to modify or release certain limitations if a transaction benefits the community. Which mechanism? I asked. He looked at me. That is not appropriate for public discussion. Is the county a party to the restriction? He did not answer. Is the fire authority a beneficiary of the fire access provision? Still nothing. Does the restriction permit private garages or paved private access roads? Peter adjusted his glasses. The association has not made a final determination. That was not an answer, but it was enough. Homeowners who had entered the room worried about assessments now understood that the board had not solved the legal issue. It had not even explained it. It had simply put a price tag on protected land and hoped the vote would happen before anyone read the fine print. The board called a recess. In the hallway, residents crowded around the certified copy of the deed restriction. Daniel spoke with neighbors who had never attended an HOA meeting before. A woman named Tessa, who lived beside the Greenbelt, said her backyard had flooded twice during the 1990s and that the drainage basin had been built after a county order. An older man named Howard pointed toward the ridge on the map. My son was on the volunteer fire crew, he said. They used that lane during the 2018 brush fire. A young couple asked whether the board could sell land without telling buyers about the restriction. No buyer should be allowed to claim they were unaware after tonight, I said. That was when Marlene made her second mistake. She returned from the recess and announced that the board would proceed with a non-binding authorization vote anyway. It is important that we not allow misinformation to prevent the association from exploring financial solutions, she said. The vote would not formally transfer the land, she explained. It would only authorize the board to continue negotiations, but the ballot language told a different story. Authorize the board of directors to execute all documents reasonably necessary to dispose of excess association, land, and secure the financial future of Ridgeview Reserve. All documents reasonably necessary. That was broad enough to become anything Marlene wanted it to become. I stood again. Will the ballot be mailed to every homeowner with the deed restriction attached? Marlene looked at Peter. The board will provide appropriate disclosure. Will the ballot identify Sierra Vista Storage Partners? The board is not required to disclose preliminary counterparties. Will the ballot state that the parcel is subject to a perpetual prohibition on buildings, paved private roadways, and exclusive facilities? Her expression went cold. The board will not be intimidated into abandoning a responsible financial decision. No one is asking you to abandon financial planning. I said, we are asking you not to sell a wildfire buffer, drainage reserve, and fire access corridor as if it were an empty lawn. The meeting ended without a vote, but Marlene sent the ballots the next morning. The restriction was not attached. The garage plans were not attached. The county concept request was not attached. The ballot included only a 2-page summary about reserve funding and rising insurance costs. Daniel called me as soon as he received it. She did it anyway. I know. What can we do? Now we make sure the people who actually rely on that land see the plans. The first call was to the County Flood Control District. The Greenbelt's drainage basin was not maintained by the county, but the district had reviewed the original stormwater plan when Ridgeview was built. I sent the engineer the deed restriction, the garage concept plan, and the proposed paved route over the swale. The second call was to the Ventura County Fire Department. I did not tell them what conclusion to reach. I asked whether the fire access corridor shown on the 1,994 tract map remained part of the community's pre-incident planning route and whether a proposed private garage development would require their review. The third call was to the county planning department I submitted the restriction and asked that it be added to the pre-application file before any formal application could be accepted. By Friday afternoon, replies began arriving. Flood control wrote that any alteration affecting the detention basin, sfale, or drainage capacity would require hydrology studies and county approval. The fire department confirmed that the upper service lane was listed as an emergency access route and could not be obstructed or narrowed without review. Planning wrote that the perpetual restriction and recorded open space designation would be flagged for any future development application. Marlene's sale was no longer a quiet board matter. Every agency that mattered now had the same documents, and the buyers had noticed. Philip Grant emailed the board that evening. His company had learned of significant unresolved title, drainage, and fire access constraints. Sierra Vista Storage Partners wanted a written assurance that Ridgeview could deliver the parcel free of development limitations. Marlene could not give it, because the restriction was already in the public record, and because she had just spent a week showing the entire neighborhood that she had known enough about it to avoid mentioning it. Adschapt, Patruzic. M. Daniel sent me a photograph from the trail. Someone had removed the old fire access sign at the Greenbelt entrance. The post remained. The bolts were still there, but the sign was gone. No one admitted taking it. Maybe it was a contractor. Maybe it was a board volunteer. Maybe it was someone who thought removing an old warning would make the land look less protected. It did not. It only made the Greenbelt look more valuable, because once someone starts erasing the evidence, you know the evidence matters. The missing fire access sign became the detail Marlene could not explain away. At first, she treated it like another example of residents becoming emotional. Her email to the community said the sign had been removed for routine replacement and trail safety review. She did not say who had removed it. She did not say when it would return. And she did not explain why a sign that had stood there for nearly 30 years needed to disappear during the exact week the board was trying to sell the land behind it. Daniel sent me a copy of the email. Then he sent me something better. A neighbor across from the trailhead had a security camera pointed toward the street. The footage did not show who physically removed the sign, but it showed a Ridgeview Reserve maintenance truck pulling up at 6:18 the previous evening. It showed the HOA vice president, Michael Reyes, stepping out with 2 workers. It showed the workers unbolting the sign, placing it in the truck bed, and driving away. The video did not prove Michael intended to hide evidence. It did prove the board had removed the sign. When Daniel asked Michael about it, Michael gave a different version from Marlene's. He said the sign had been removed because the trail was being evaluated for redesign. That was not routine replacement. That was an admission that the board was preparing the land for a different use before the membership had approved anything. I added the footage to the file. Then I found the final document that changed the entire balance of the dispute. It was not in the HOA records. It was in the 1993 development agreement attached to the original grant deed. The restriction on Parcel G had been created as a condition of the county's approval for the Ridgeview Reserve Tract. The original owner, the developer, and Ventura County had agreed that the Greenbelt would remain open space because the hillside development had increased runoff, narrowed natural habitat, and placed homes near a high fire hazard zone. The agreement named the county as a third-party beneficiary. That meant the restriction was not merely a private promise between a long-gone landowner and a developer. It was enforceable by the county. I read the clause aloud to Daniel over the phone. In the event of any breach or threatened breach of the open space restrictions, the county may pursue injunctive relief, require restoration, and recover enforcement costs. Daniel was quiet. So the county can stop them? The county can do more than stop them from building. It can stop them from selling the land for a use that violates the purpose of the restriction. What about the ballot? The ballot does not erase a county enforceable deed restriction. The next morning, the county planning director sent Ridgeview Reserve a formal notice. The letter did not accuse the board of misconduct. It did not threaten anyone with criminal charges. It simply stated that Parcel G remains subject to recorded open space, drainage, and emergency access limitations. Any sale, lease, subdivision, or development proposal inconsistent with those limitations would require county review and could not proceed without a legally valid modification of the underlying restriction. Then came the sentence Marlene had spent weeks trying to avoid. The county does not support conversion of Parcel G to private garage facilities or restricted vehicle storage. The letter was copied to the board, Sierra Vista Storage Partners, the county fire marshal, flood control, and the association's attorney. By lunchtime, the story had changed. Residents were no longer debating whether the garages might bring in money. They were asking why the board had spent association resources pursuing a sale that the county had already made clear was incompatible with the land's recorded purpose. Marlene tried one final defense. She sent another community email claiming that the board had merely explored options and that outside parties had distorted a responsible reserve planning discussion. But the board's own records told a different story. After receiving a demand from several homeowners, the association's treasurer released the executive session minutes related to the proposed transaction. The minutes showed that Marlene and Michael had met with Sierra Vista Storage Partners 4 times before the community received any notice. They had approved an exclusive negotiation period. They had authorized $31, 400 inches, consulting, title, and preliminary planning expenses from the reserve account, and they had been warned by the association attorney that Parcel G carried substantial restrictions likely to prevent the contemplated garage development. That warning appeared in the minutes. Marlene had not overlooked the restriction. She had been told about it. She had simply decided that residents did not need to know before they voted. At the emergency meeting the following Monday, the clubhouse filled again. This time, nobody came wondering whether the greenbelt was excess land. They came carrying copies of the county notice. Marlene stood at the front table with Peter Cohn, the association attorney. She looked smaller than she had the week before. Though she wore the same polished clothes and spoke in the same controlled voice, the board acted in good faith. She said, "We were trying to avoid financial hardship for the community." A woman named Tessa stood from the back row. "My house backs onto the drainage basin," she said. "If that area is underutilized, I'd like to know where you plan to send the water." Marlene did not answer. Howard, the man whose son had volunteered with the fire crew, stood next. "My son used that upper lane during the 2018 fire. Did you tell the fire department you were selling their access route?" "We were exploring alternatives," Marlene said. "What alternatives?" Again, no answer. Then Daniel walked to the front. He did not raise his voice. He did not call anyone names. He placed the original deed restriction, the county notice, and the board minutes on the table in front of Marlene. "You told us this was a financial solution," he said, "but you knew the parcel was restricted. You knew the garages were not allowed. You spent reserve funds before homeowners even knew the land was being marketed." Marlene looked at him. "The association still has serious budget concerns." "Then bring us a real budget plan," Daniel said. "Not a secret deal that destroys the reason this neighborhood was approved in the first place." The room broke into applause. It went on long enough that Marlene had to sit down. The board voted that night to cancel the negotiation authorization and terminate the Sierra Vista Storage Partners deal. The vote was unanimous except for Marlene and Michael. Sierra Vista withdrew its offer the next morning. The company's letter said it was unable to proceed due to title encumbrances, regulatory constraints, and unanticipated access limitations. That was the business version of the truth. The greenbelt had never been theirs to turn into a luxury garage court. 2 weeks later, residents submitted a recall petition. Marlene resigned before the recall vote could take place. Michael stayed long enough to attend one more meeting, then resigned after the treasurer disclosed the full amount of reserve money spent on the failed deal. The association did not get the $1.85 million Marlene had promised, but it also did not lose the hillside that protected it. The new board hired an independent reserve specialist. The report was less dramatic than Marlene's presentation, but it was honest. Ridgeview Reserve did need better planning. It needed gradual increases, better vendor oversight, and a realistic schedule for major repairs. What it did not need was to sell a fire break and drainage reserve for a project that would have created more risk than it solved. The county required the HOA to replace the removed fire access sign. The new board did more than that. They installed updated markers along the trail, restored the weathered drainage swale, cleared invasive brush under the supervision of the fire department, and added a plaque near the trail entrance. It did not mention Marlene. It did not mention the failed garage deal. It simply read, Ridgeview Reserve Greenbelt, protected open space, stormwater, wildfire safety, and community access. A month later, I met Daniel and his daughter near the trailhead. The orange survey flags were gone. The old oak still leaned over the slope. The grass had begun to turn greener after a light rain. Near the basin, a county crew was checking drainage grates before winter. Daniel's daughter ran ahead on the path, then stopped to look at the new sign. Did we save the park? She asked. Daniel looked at me. I let him answer. We saved something important, he told her. She seemed satisfied with that. Children often are. When the adults finally stop making things complicated. As we walked back toward the street, Daniel said, I almost didn't call you. I thought maybe I was overreacting to some flags in the dirt. You saw something that did not fit, I said. I thought they were just survey flags. They were. He smiled. That's not what I meant. I know. The flags were only plastic and wire. The documents were only paper. The greenbelt itself looked like nothing more than dry grass, drainage concrete, and a few old trees. But every one of those things had a purpose. And when a board decided the land was empty because it could not see that purpose, the records were there to remind them. Some property is valuable because of what can be built on it. And some property is valuable because it is the one thing nobody should ever be allowed to build over. If your HOA wanted to sell the greenbelt behind your home to avoid higher fees, would you support the deal or dig into the records before you voted? Tell me your answer in the comments. Subscribe to Anna's Neighborhood Justice for HOA drama, property rights battles, and neighborhood conflicts where one overlooked document can change everything.